Welcome. The title I've given to this talk is Christianity, a Radical Faith? Towards the close of the last century, many moons ago now, I used to teach in our Jesuit secondary school in Galway. As usually happens after a few years teaching in the same school, you get to know some of the parents well, and eventually that long sought after moment arrives. You are invited to dinner in their home one evening, maybe despite the protests of their teenage children. After all, it's better to keep teachers in the classroom where they belong. And so it happened. One evening I was invited to dine at the home of a very pleasant couple and their teenage children, students of mine, all three of them. The food was delicious. I'd been asked what I would like beforehand. The wine flowed. I'd been assured that a taxi for the return journey home would be supplied. God was in God's heaven and all was right with the world. By the time the dessert came round, the conversation also flowed. Now I should tell you, this couple were very fine practicing Roman Catholics. The father, despite having a very demanding and responsible job, gave much of his spare time to the Vincent de Paul Society. The mother was a daily mass goer and a generous helper in all school and parish activities. Now I want to ask you a very serious question. Why do parents always feel they need to bring up the subject of religion when they invite a priest around for dinner, especially after he's had a few glasses of vino? Don't they realise that religion is the very last thing priests want to talk about at these hallowed moments? But invariably, this particular night, religion did come up as a topic of conversation. At a certain lull in the conversation, the father said to me, "You know, Brendan, Christianity isn't really a radical faith at all. It doesn't demand very much of us." The flow of wine stuck in my throat. I had a horrible, creeping sense that maybe at least at that moment he was right. I wasn't exactly witnessing myself to the radicality of the Christian call that evening. I can't remember exactly how I got round or wriggled out of the father's challenging observation about Christianity, but afterwards, when I got home and all the next day, I felt distinctly uneasy and a little defensive as well. Had this good man never read the Gospels? Surely he had heard of the Beatitudes. To be honest, I also felt somewhat guilty. All that wine and food, some witness I'd been. Let me move you on a few years. After my time in Galway, I spent 7 years in formation work in Birmingham, and to escape every now and again from the Jesuit novices and to give them some relief from me, I used to teach an introductory course in spirituality in a teacher training college. There were about 50 students in the class, all nominally Christian at least, that is, except for two. In the front row there sat two young Muslim men, and strangely enough, these two young men were probably the most pleasant, the most interested and enthusiastic of all the students. Invariably they would stay behind after class to ask questions or simply to chat. They even invited me for coffee one morning. All was going splendidly in the course until the day I came to deal with Christian spirituality specifically. I began to talk of the centrality of the incarnation in Christian belief, God becoming human in Jesus Christ, the very mystery at the core of Christianity which we are preparing to celebrate during this Advent time. As I spoke to the class, I couldn't help but notice that the two Muslim students were shaking their heads in disbelief. No, they could not accept this. Such a scandalous idea that God could become human and share our human lot was an insult to Allah. It was sheer blasphemy. These Muslim students in no way wished to insult the Christian faith, nor do I wish in any way to disparage the Muslim faith. The Quran actually shows great reverence for Jesus. It calls Jesus the messenger, the prophet, the word and spirit of God, and refers to Christians as those nearest in love to Muslims. Sadly, history and indeed events today certainly do not always reflect this statement in the Quran. But the major difference between our faiths is that for the Muslims, Allah is totally other, totally transcendent. For us Christians, Jesus was human and divine. God became human so that we may become divine, as Saint Irenaeus of Lyon put it way back in the 2nd century. Once Christianity affirms that a man in Jesus Christ is at the same time God, Christianity stands alone among the religions of the world. This Christian affirmation is a scandal to the Muslims, to the Jews, and to all religions and pious people of yesterday and today who venerate and adore a transcendent God, a God who is totally other, a God beyond this world, infinite, eternal, incomprehensible, and above everything that human beings can be and know. We Christians claim that the God of our faith, indeed the God of the Jews, the Muslims, etc., has actually become human, become concrete in a human being, in Jesus of Nazareth. We Christians learn the very meaning of our lives, our roots and true humanity, by meditating on the human life of Jesus Christ, God become human for us. Christmas shows that there is a purpose and a goal to our lives revealed in the newborn child. As the Christmas carol says, the hopes and fears of all our years are met in Thee tonight. Now we have to speak in very practical terms here. Either Jesus Christ coming into our world has profound meaning for us, or else it means nothing at all. The late Jewish rabbi Abraham Heschel once said, Jesus Christ is of no importance unless he is of supreme importance. By far the most important and significant event in the whole course of human history will be celebrated, will be remembered with or without understanding at the end of this season of Advent. The towering miracle of God's visit to this planet on which we live will be glossed over, brushed aside, or rendered impotent by over-familiarity. Even by the Christian believer, the full weight of the event is not always appreciated. The God we Christians worship has been here on this planet. Nothing can alter the fact that we live on a visited planet. What we are in fact celebrating is the awe-inspiring humility of God, and no amount of familiarity with the trappings of Christmas should ever blind us to its quiet but explosive significance. Through the incarnation, God crawls into ordinary life and invites us to meet God there. This central truth of Christianity is shocking, earth-shattering news. Or is it, for us? The London Times, in a brilliant leading article some years ago, described the incarnation as the shocking centre of our Christian faith, which dares to claim that in the fragility and contingency of a single human life, the Creator knew his creation from the inside. In a newspaper which the same day published stories of human tragedy from around the world, the true message of Christmas was shown to be far removed from sentimental carols and fairy lights. The article went on, God comes into the muck and mire. Part of the carnality of incarnation is that God comes into the carnage. And that is a scandal. It is shocking. It is radical. The Protestant theologian Karl Barth once wrote, anyone who has really understood God, that God became human, can never again speak and act in an inhuman way. We might then ask ourselves, has anyone ever fully understood? Way back in 1999, a statue of Ecce Homo, Behold the Man, the naked Christ, was placed on a plinth in Trafalgar Square in London. The statue was of a slim young man who looked incredibly vulnerable. Unlike the larger-than-life-size statues of the great historical figures around him, this statue was just our size. A passerby is reported to have said, "If that's Jesus Christ, it's a bloody miracle. You couldn't put your faith in someone like that. He's as weak as a kitten." But isn't that the whole point? The young man was right to be alarmed. The Word of God, Jesus Christ, was made flesh, thereby making himself vulnerable, open to the possibility of suffering at the hands of other human beings, because he came as a servant of love. Because God became flesh in Jesus Christ, it is as if we could take it out on him for daring to love us, daring to threaten us with his love, daring to transform us by his love, and that might make all the difference. Just to show you that such a transformation was and is possible, could I quote for you a description of an early Christian community from a Roman writer named Aristides when he was defending Christians before the Roman Emperor Hadrian in the early 2nd century. It goes like this. Christians love one another. They never fail to help widows. They save orphans from those who would hurt them. If a man has something, he gives freely to the man who has nothing. If they see a stranger, Christians take him into their homes and treat him or her as a brother or sister. Not that they consider themselves brothers or sisters in the usual sense, but brothers and sisters instead through the Spirit in God. And if they hear that one of them is in jail or persecuted for professing the name of their Redeemer, they all give him what he needs. If possible, they will bail him out. If one of them is poor and there isn't enough food to go around, they fast several days to give him the food he needs. We are dealing here with a new kind of person. There is something divine in them. And that was not just then. Even today, when we hear criticism and negativity in and about the Roman Catholic Church, it's heartening to read that more than a quarter of the medical aid to Africa is supplied by the Roman Catholic Church. We don't often read about that in the media. Now, it's not often that you'll find a Jesuit quoting a Dominican. Jesuits and Dominicans weren't always the best of friends in history, as you may know, but it's coming up to Christmas and I've decided to forgive them, for now. One of my favourite spiritual writers is the former Master General of the Dominicans, Father Timothy Radcliffe. And in his book, What is the Point of Being a Christian?, Timothy writes, I quote, "There should be something shocking about being a Christian that puzzles people and makes them wonder what is at the heart of our lives. Without our lives being in some way odd, if we just conform, then our words about faith will be empty. If people see that Christians are prepared to make slightly crazy gestures instead of always timidly drawing back because they might not work or people might not like them, then they will catch the whiff of our extravagant hope. Would we like to get even the merest whiff of extravagant hope this Christmas? If we do, it might just be because we have pondered in these days upon this great mystery. We have tasted the reality that once upon a time our trusting God risked placing a helpless baby in human hands to reveal and earth the divine essence, vulnerable and unconditional love. The Bethlehem baby's defenseless presence, his shocking and precarious weakness, overturns all our ideas about the nature of God and can stun us into awed silence. Advent and Christmas are a time for us to savour the joy of our faith and its message of everlasting hope. The stupendous, radical Christian message is simply given. If you want to see what our God is like, look here into the manger. Cease to be afraid. Take hope. Who said Christianity was not a radical faith? Surely it is the most radical of all faiths. Perhaps in these days we can pray together as St. Ignatius of Loyola would have us do, to have a felt knowledge of this stupendous mystery of the incarnation, God made one of us, God among us, Emmanuel, and thereby be strengthened with the grace of hope this Advent. Thank you, and have a blessed Advent.